This is Marcus Webb, broadcasting on 104.7 FM from the Riverside Communications Tower. If you can hear me, then your radio still works and you're still alive. That's more than I can say for most people. It's been 90 days since the sun rose, 3 months of absolute, unrelenting darkness, and I need to tell you what I've learned, because somebody needs to know before it's too late. Someone needs to understand what's really happening out there in the black. The last sunrise was March 17th. I remember because it was my daughter's birthday. She would have been 7. Would have been because Sarah died 2 years ago in a car accident on Route 44, just outside of Millbrook. A drunk driver crossed the median at 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. Sarah was in the back seat, coming home from dance class. She loved ballet. Had these pink shoes with ribbons she'd spent 20 minutes every class learning to tie properly. The impact killed her instantly, according to the paramedics. They told me that like it was supposed to be comforting, like instant death was a mercy. Maybe it was. Maybe it's better than what's happening now. Every year on her birthday, I'd take the day off work and just drive. Didn't matter where. Sometimes I'd go to the cemetery and sit by her grave for hours, trying to talk to her, trying to explain why I wasn't there to protect her. Other times I'd just get in the truck and point it down random highways until I ran out of gas or daylight, whichever came first. My ex-wife Lisa stopped inviting me to the memorial services she organized. Said my grief was too raw, too uncomfortable, that I needed to move on for James's sake. James is our son, 9 years old now, and maybe Lisa was right. Maybe I wasn't moving on properly. But grief doesn't follow a schedule. It doesn't care about propriety or healing timelines. That morning, March 17th, started normal. I'd woken up at 4 a.m. like I always did on Sarah's birthday, unable to sleep, and I'd driven west out of Riverside toward the state line. I stopped at a rest stop outside of Millbrook, the same town where Sarah died, and I drank gas station coffee that tasted like rust and burnt plastic from a styrofoam cup that was too hot to hold comfortably. I sat on a concrete picnic table that had someone's initials carved into it, and I watched the sun come up. 6:47 a.m., right on schedule. Pale orange light spreading across the horizon like watercolor paint, bleeding across wet paper, burning off the morning mist that hung over the fields. The sky went from black to deep purple to pink to gold, and for those few minutes, watching that gradient shift, I felt something close to peace. It was beautiful. It was the last time any of us saw it. By 10 a.m. I was back on the road, heading south on Highway 41, not really paying attention to where I was going. Just driving and listening to the classic rock station and trying not to think about pink ballet shoes with ribbons. The morning felt normal. Traffic was light. The sun was bright and warm through the windshield. People were going about their lives, completely unaware that everything was about to change. By noon, that's when people started noticing something was wrong. The light wasn't changing. It stayed locked at that early morning angle, shadows pointing west like they were frozen in time. Everything bathed in that golden hour light that photographers love and chase. At first, I didn't notice. I was too lost in my own head. But then I stopped for gas around 12:30 and the attendant mentioned it. Said it was weird how the sun seemed stuck. Made a joke about daylight savings time being broken. I looked up at the sky and realized he was right. The sun was in the same position it had been an hour ago. Same angle. Same intensity. Like time had stopped, or the earth had stopped rotating, or something fundamental about how the universe worked had just broken. By 2 p.m., people were definitely noticing. My phone started buzzing with news alerts. Social media was exploding with posts and pictures. Everyone pointing their cameras at the sky, at their watches, at the shadows that refused to change. Lots of theories getting thrown around. Atmospheric phenomenon, weird cloud formations, some kind of mass hallucination caused by chemicals in the water supply, secret government weather experiments, aliens. The jokes were already starting too. Memes about the sun hitting the snooze button, photoshopped images of God holding the Earth's pause button. Humanity's default response to the impossible has always been humor. Like if we can laugh at it, it can't be that serious. But then around 3 p.m., the emergency broadcasts started. Official government statements saying they were investigating an unusual solar event, that scientists were working on understanding what was happening, that everyone should remain calm and stay tuned for updates. That's when people started getting scared. When the government tells you to stay calm, it means things are very much not calm. I was still on Highway 41, maybe 40 miles south of Riverside, when the sun just stopped. Didn't set gradually like it was supposed to. Didn't sink below the horizon in that slow, beautiful way that gives you warning and time to adjust. Just stopped existing. One moment there was light, dim and strange and frozen, but still light. And the next moment, complete darkness fell like someone had thrown a switch. 4:23 p.m., according to my truck's dashboard clock. The sun vanished mid-sky and didn't come back. The highway went black. No streetlights came on because it was supposed to still be afternoon. No warning, no transition. Just instant, absolute darkness, like someone had pulled a bag over the entire world's head. I slammed on the brakes and felt the truck fishtail on the asphalt. Behind me I heard screeching tires and the crunch of metal as cars collided in the sudden blackness. I managed to get the truck to the shoulder, heart hammering, hands shaking on the steering wheel. I turned on the headlights and they carved out a small tunnel in the dark, showing me the highway ahead covered in broken glass and stopped vehicles. Behind me, more crashes. The sound of impact after impact as drivers who'd been going 70 miles an hour suddenly couldn't see anything. Those first few hours were chaos. Pure, screaming chaos. I sat in my truck with the engine running and the headlights on, listening to the radio as the emergency broadcasts became more frantic. All the stations were reporting the same thing. The sun was gone. Not just not visible, but actually gone. Observatories around the world confirmed it. The sun had vanished from every form of detection. Radio telescopes couldn't find it. Satellites showed nothing but empty space where the sun should be. And it wasn't just the sun. The moon was gone too. The stars. Every source of light in the sky had been erased, leaving nothing but infinite black. Like the entire universe had been turned off except for Earth. Power grids started failing within the first hour. Without sunlight, solar panels went dark. Without the sun's gravitational influence, something was wrong with the Earth's magnetic field, causing power stations to fluctuate and shut down. Cell towers lost connection. The internet started collapsing as data centers ran out of backup power. I tried calling Lisa, tried calling my son James, but the cell networks were already overloaded. Couldn't get through. Just busy signals and error messages and eventually nothing at all. Around 6 p.m. I heard the pileup. I'd driven north, back toward Riverside, using my headlights to navigate, going maybe 20 miles an hour because I couldn't see more than 50 feet ahead. Traffic lights were all dark, stop signs invisible. And then I came around a bend on Route 44, the same road where Sarah died. and I saw it. Dozens of cars crashed together in a massive tangle of metal and broken glass. Some were on fire, the flames the only source of light besides my headlights. I could hear people screaming, calling for help, crying. I stopped the truck and got out with my flashlight, started trying to help. There was a woman trapped in a sedan, her legs pinned under the dashboard, blood running down her face. I tried to pry the door open, but it was jammed shut. She kept asking me where the sun went, kept saying her daughter was supposed to meet her after school, kept asking if the lights would come back on. I told her yes, told her it would be okay, told her help was coming. But even as I said it, I knew I was lying. I could hear sirens in the distance, but they were faint and getting fainter. Emergency services were overwhelmed. There weren't enough ambulances or fire trucks for every accident happening in the sudden darkness. I stayed there for 2 hours, doing what I could. Pulled 3 people out of wrecked cars. Gave first aid to a man with a broken arm. Sat with a teenager who was in shock, just rocking back and forth and crying. And all around us, the darkness pressed in like something physical, something with weight and presence. The fires from the crashed cars eventually burned out. My flashlight battery was getting low, and I realized I couldn't stay there, couldn't help these people, could barely help myself. So I got back in my truck, and I drove home to Riverside, using the last of my fuel and my failing headlights, navigating roads I'd known my entire life, but barely recognized in the dark. I reached my house around 10 p.m. It was dark. No lights in the windows, no car in the driveway. I used my dying flashlight to check inside, calling out for Lisa and James, but the house was empty. Food still on the table from breakfast. James's backpack on the floor by the door. Lisa's purse gone, which meant she'd taken it when she left. I found a note on the kitchen counter, written in Lisa's handwriting. Took James to my mother's in Asheville. Come if you can. I love you. Please be safe. Asheville was 300 miles away. With no working gas pumps, no street lights, no way to navigate, I'd never make it. Lisa and James were gone. I was alone. I should have left right then. Should have tried anyway. But I was exhausted and terrified, and I didn't know what to do. So I sat in my dark living room with a candle burning on the coffee table, and I listened to the radio on battery power. The broadcasts were getting worse. Reports of looting and violence as people panicked. Hospitals running out of backup power. Water treatment plants shutting down. Governments around the world declaring states of emergency, martial law in major cities. But it didn't matter because there was no way to enforce anything in absolute darkness. And then there were the other reports, the ones that didn't make sense. People calling in to radio stations saying they'd seen things moving in the dark. Figures that looked human but moved wrong. Voices calling out names of dead relatives. One woman sobbed into the phone that her husband, who died of cancer 6 months ago, had knocked on her door asking to be let in. The radio host, trying to stay professional, suggested these were hallucinations brought on by stress and fear. But you could hear the doubt in his voice. You could hear that he wasn't sure anymore what was real. I spent that first night sitting in my living room, candle burning down, radio playing, listening to the world fall apart. And I thought about Sarah. Thought about how, 2 years ago, I'd lost her and felt like the world had ended. But the world had kept going. The sun had kept rising. Life had continued whether I wanted it to or not. Now the sun was actually gone. The world was actually ending, and all I could think was that Sarah was lucky. She didn't have to see this. By day 3, I'd made a decision. Sitting in my dark house with my dwindling supplies, waiting for something to change, wasn't going to help anyone. I needed to do something. Needed to be useful. And I kept thinking about the radio station where I'd worked for 15 years before Sarah died. The Riverside Communications Tower was 3 miles outside of town, a 300-foot structure that broadcast signals for half a dozen stations. I'd worked there as a sound engineer and overnight DJ, back when I still did that kind of work, back before grief made it impossible to show up reliably. I knew that tower had a backup generator that could run for months if managed carefully. Knew it had supplies stored for emergencies. Knew it had equipment that could broadcast for hundreds of miles. Most importantly, I knew I could help people from there. Could coordinate information. Could warn people about dangers. Could give survivors something to listen to in the darkness. So I packed what I could carry. Bottled water, canned food, batteries, flashlights. My handgun that I'd never fired except at a range. And I walked through the darkness toward the tower. The walk took 5 hours. Should have taken 45 minutes, but I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead with my flashlight. Kept having to stop and check street signs, navigate around abandoned cars, avoid obstacles I couldn't see until I was almost on top of them. The town was dead. Most houses dark and empty. A few with candlelight or battery-powered lanterns visible in windows. People huddled inside, not knowing what else to do. I saw one man sitting on his porch with a shotgun across his lap, watching the street. He didn't say anything when I walked past, just tracked me with the barrel. I reached the tower around 3 a.m. on day 4. The gate was open, lock broken, not a good sign. I approached carefully, flashlight in one hand, gun in the other, calling out to see if anyone was there. No response. The building was dark and empty. I checked every room. The control booth, the equipment room, the storage area, the break room with its ancient coffee maker and microwave. No one. But there were signs someone had been here recently. The generator had been started and then stopped. Logbooks were scattered across the control room floor, and on the wall, written in what looked like spray paint, were the words, "They're not real. Don't listen." I found the station manager's logbook under a desk. Daniel Torres had been the manager here since before I started working. Good guy. Patient teacher. Had trained me on the equipment when I was 23 and didn't know anything about broadcasting. His final entries told a story. He'd come to the tower on day 1, right after the sun vanished, thinking the same thing I had, that he could help, could broadcast information, could be useful. The first few entries were professional, documenting what he was seeing, power failures, people panicking, emergency procedures. Then on day 2, the entries changed. Daniel wrote that he'd seen someone outside the tower, someone he recognized, his brother Miguel, who died in a house fire 10 years ago. Miguel was outside the fence calling Daniel's name, asking him to come down and talk. Daniel knew it couldn't be real. Knew Miguel was dead and buried, but the voice was perfect. The way Miguel used to say his name, the little laugh at the end, everything exact. Day 3, the entries became frantic. More voices, his mother, his daughter Maria who lived in Seattle, his childhood dog. All of them outside the tower calling to him, saying they needed him, saying it was safe to come down. The last entry was just one sentence. They need my help. I can hear them crying. That's when I understood what the spray-painted message meant. Whatever Daniel had seen and heard out there, whatever was calling to him in the darkness, it wasn't real. It was something pretending. Something that knew exactly what to say to make him come outside. I never found Daniel's body. Never found any sign of what happened to him after he left that message. He just disappeared into the darkness like so many others would. I spent my first week at the tower getting systems running properly. The generator was in decent shape but needed maintenance. I had to ration fuel carefully, run it only during broadcast hours and when I needed light. The radio equipment was old but functional. I set up a broadcast schedule. 12 hours a day, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., transmitting on 104.7 FM and as many backup frequencies as I could manage. Those first broadcasts were basic. Information sharing, survival tips, broadcasting my location in case other survivors wanted to coordinate. I talked about staying safe, keeping lights on, conserving resources. I played music too, because people needed that. Needed to hear something familiar and human in the darkness. By day 10, I started getting responses, faint signals from other survivors with radio equipment. A trucker named Bill Holloway broadcasting from his rig parked at a rest stop. A family with a ham radio in their basement. A National Guard unit that had managed to secure a shopping mall and establish a shelter. We shared information. Bill told me the highways were completely impassable. Crashed cars everywhere. No fuel available, no way to navigate safely. The family with the ham radio, the Johnstons, said they'd been hearing strange sounds at night. Scraping on their walls. Voices calling their names. They were terrified to go outside. The National Guard unit, led by a sergeant named Patricia Hayes, reported they had maybe 300 civilians sheltering at the mall. They had supplies for a few weeks, maybe a month if rationed carefully. But they were seeing things outside. Figures circling the parking lot. People who looked almost right, but moved wrong. I documented everything, kept logs, made maps based on where people were broadcasting from, started to see patterns. On day 11, I saw one of them for the first time. It was around 2 a.m. I wasn't broadcasting, was just sitting in the control room with a battery-powered lantern, going through supply inventories, when I heard footsteps outside. Slow and steady, crunching on gravel, heading past the tower's fence. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the window, pointed the beam down toward the parking lot, and I saw it. A figure walking past the fence, heading east at a steady pace. From a distance, in the dark, it looked human. Normal proportions, normal gait. But when my light hit it, I saw the details that were wrong. Arms too long, hanging past the knees, fingers nearly dragging the ground. Head tilted at an angle that would break a normal person's neck. And the way it moved, smooth and boneless, like something that had watched people walk but didn't quite understand the mechanics. Like it was imitating movement it had seen but never felt. I called out, asked if they needed help. The figure stopped, turned toward my light, and I saw its face. Eyes that reflected the flashlight beam like an animal's, flat and metallic and emotionless. Pupils too large, taking up most of the eye. Mouth hanging open slightly, too wide, stretched back toward the ears in a way mouths aren't supposed to stretch. Skin that looked gray and waxy and loose, like it didn't fit properly over whatever was underneath. It stared at me for maybe 10 seconds. No expression, no recognition, just empty eyes and that wrong smile. Then it turned away and kept walking east, same steady pace, like I hadn't been there at all. I watched it disappear into the darkness, and I realized my hands were shaking. Realized I'd been holding my breath. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't human. Wasn't even pretending very hard to be human. It was something else wearing human shape like an ill-fitting costume. Over the next week, I saw more of them. Dozens. Walking past the tower at night. Always heading east. Always that same pace. Sometimes alone, sometimes in groups of 3 or 4. Never acknowledging me when I shined lights on them. Never deviating from their path. Just walking east like they were being pulled by something I couldn't see. I started documenting them. Took notes on their appearances, their movements, their timing. Noticed that they only appeared after midnight. Noticed they avoided direct light, not because it hurt them, but because they simply didn't go where light was present. They'd walk around pools of illumination from working streetlights, avoid buildings with generators running, stay in the deepest darkness. And I started hearing the sounds. Deeper into the night, when the walkers had passed and the darkness felt heavier, there were other noises. Scraping, like something being dragged across pavement. Clicking, like insect mandibles. And sometimes, if I listened carefully, voices. Human voices calling out names, asking for help, saying words like please and don't leave me and I'm scared. I never responded to those voices. Never opened the door when they seemed to come from right outside. Because I'd read Daniel's logbook. I knew what happened to people who listened. On day 15, I made contact with Elena Vasquez. Her signal came in around 8 p.m., weak but clear. She was broadcasting from a fire station in Grantsville, about 40 miles north of Riverside. Said she'd been listening to my broadcasts and wanted to coordinate information. Elena's voice was steady and professional. She'd been a 911 dispatcher before the sun vanished, was used to staying calm in emergencies. She had 6 other survivors with her at the fire station, including 2 firefighters who'd been on duty when the darkness fell. We talked for 3 hours that first night, shared everything we knew. Elena's group had noticed the same walking things, all heading east, all ignoring living people unless provoked. One of her survivors, a man named Jeff Dawson, had tried following one, keeping distance, trying to see where they went. He'd radioed back for about 2 miles, describing what he was seeing. Then his radio had gone silent mid-sentence. They'd found Jeff's walkie-talkie on the ground the next morning, covered in something wet and dark and sticky that none of them wanted to touch. Jeff himself was gone. No body, no blood, no signs of struggle. Just the abandoned radio and footprints leading east that gradually became less and less human-looking until they were something else entirely. Elena asked if I'd noticed anything else, any patterns, any weaknesses. I told her about the light, how the things avoided it. Told her about the voices that called out at night, saying names and familiar phrases. Told her about Daniel Torres and how he disappeared after hearing his dead brother's voice. Elena went quiet for a long time after I shared that. Then she told me about David Chen, one of her survivors. 3 nights ago, he'd heard his mother's voice calling from outside the fire station. His mother had died of dementia 2 years ago. Didn't even recognize David at the end. But the voice outside was her voice from when he was a child, from before the disease, calling him Davy like she used to, asking him to come outside so she could see him. David had wanted to open the door, had been reaching for the handle when the other survivors grabbed him. He'd fought them, screaming that his mother needed him, that she was scared and alone. They'd had to lock him in a room for his own safety. He'd cried for hours. Elena said David hadn't spoken since. Just sat in the corner, staring at the door, waiting. We agreed to stay in contact. Daily check-ins at 8 p.m., sharing information, watching for patterns. It felt good to know I wasn't alone, that there were other people out there trying to survive, trying to make sense of this. We maintained that contact for 15 days. Every night at 8 p.m., Elena's signal would come through and we'd talk for an hour or two. She told me about her group, about Maria Flores, a nurse who was keeping everyone as healthy as possible with limited medical supplies. About the Thompson brothers, Tom and Eddie, firefighters who'd reinforced the station's doors and windows, made it as secure as they could. About Sarah Kim, a teenager who'd been at the station filing a report about a stolen bike when the sun vanished. I told her about my broadcasts, about the other survivors I'd made contact with, about the patterns I was seeing in how the walking things moved and behaved. On day 30, Elena's signal went dead. I called at 8 p.m. like always, nothing but static. I tried every hour for the next 48 hours, tried different frequencies, called out on the open channels in case someone else could relay a message. Nothing. Just silence, and the empty hiss of dead air. I never found out what happened to Elena and her group, whether the walkers got them or something else, or if they just decided to leave and didn't have time to say goodbye. The not knowing was worse than knowing would have been. I was alone again with my broadcasts and the darkness and the things that walked past my tower every night. By day 35, I'd established regular contact with maybe a dozen other survivors scattered across the region. We formed an informal network, sharing information and resources, warning each other about dangers. There was Marcus Chen, the teenager broadcasting from his family's bomb shelter. His parents and sister were dead, killed in the initial chaos when the sun vanished. He was alone and terrified, but resourceful. He'd been going through his father's old astronomy equipment, trying to understand what happened. There was Bill Holloway, still in his truck at that rest stop, running a broadcast on CB radio. He was a Vietnam vet in his 70s, and he'd seen enough horror in his life that the darkness didn't break him. He gave practical survival advice: how to purify water, how to ration food, how to stay calm when the voices called your name. There was Dr. Jennifer Walsh, broadcasting from what was left of Riverside General Hospital. She had maybe 20 patients still alive, was managing their care with no power and dwindling supplies. She reported that people were starting to exhibit psychological symptoms: dissociation, paranoia, hallucinations brought on by stress and darkness. She was concerned about long-term mental health effects. There was the Morrison family, Rick, his wife Amanda, and their 3 kids. They'd barricaded themselves in their farmhouse 10 miles outside of town. They had a well for water, a root cellar full of canned goods, solar panels that were useless now, but they'd saved the batteries. They were surviving. But every night they heard things circling their house. Footsteps on the porch, tapping on windows, voices calling the children's names. And there was Catherine Pierce, a former high school biology teacher who'd set up shelter in the school. She had 9 other survivors with her, mostly other staff members and students who'd been there when everything went dark. Catherine was analytical. She'd been documenting everything scientifically, taking notes, forming hypotheses about what was happening. Catherine was the first person to suggest what the walking things actually were. On day 38, during our regular check-in, she said she'd been examining one of them from a distance with binoculars, watching how it moved, how it was constructed, and she'd noticed something. The thing was wearing clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt, work boots. But the clothes didn't fit right. Too loose in some places, too tight in others, like they'd been put on a body that was the wrong shape. And underneath the clothes, through gaps and tears, she'd seen skin. Human skin. Real skin. But it was moving independently, shifting and sliding like it wasn't attached to anything solid underneath. Catherine's theory was that the walking things weren't monsters or aliens or creatures from some other dimension. They were people, or they used to be people. Something had happened to them, changed them, hollowed them out, and filled them with something else. They were human bodies being operated like puppets by something that didn't understand how bodies worked. The thought made me sick, made me think about all those disappearances. Elena's group, Daniel Torres, Jeff Dawson who'd followed one and never came back. All those people who'd vanished into the darkness. Were they still alive somewhere? Were they conscious while something else controlled their bodies? Or were they dead, and these things were just wearing their corpses? I didn't have answers. None of us did. We just kept surviving, day by day, trying to make sense of something that might not have any sense to make. On day 40, I climbed to the top of the tower. 300 feet up, metal stairs that rang under my boots, wind howling through the structure. I'd been avoiding the climb because heights made me nervous, and the tower swayed in the wind. But I needed to see, needed to know what was happening beyond my small circle of light. I brought binoculars and a powerful spotlight, the kind we used to use for searching the grounds at night. Reached the top platform as false dawn approached, that time around 6 a.m. when your body still expects the sun to rise even though it won't. From up there, I could see for miles in every direction when I turned on the spotlight, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The world was moving. That's the only way I can describe it. In every direction, as far as the light could reach, I saw them. Thousands of those walking things, maybe tens of thousands, all moving east. A migration, an exodus. Rivers of them flowing through streets and over hills and across fields, all moving with that same steady pace toward something I couldn't see. They weren't following roads, weren't avoiding obstacles. They just walked in straight lines east, climbing over cars and through buildings and across rivers. Nothing stopped them. Nothing slowed them. They just kept walking. And below them, below the walkers, the ground itself looked wrong. I saw patterns in the earth, like veins or roots spreading outward. Dark lines that seemed to pulse with a faint reddish light. The darkness wasn't just absence of light anymore. It was becoming something physical, something alive, something that was spreading and growing and consuming the world. I sat up there for 3 days, watching through the binoculars, documenting everything, taking photographs with an old Polaroid camera I'd found in the station. The flash seemed pathetically small against all that darkness, but the photos came out. Blurry, underexposed, but showing enough to confirm what I was seeing wasn't hallucination or exhaustion. The patterns in the ground spread farther each night. The number of walkers increased. I estimated at least 50,000 had passed within view of the tower over those 3 days. An army of former humans marching east toward something. And on the eastern horizon, maybe 100 miles away, there was a glow. Not the warm yellow of sunrise. Not any color the sun had ever been. This was deep red, like blood or rust or dying embers, and it pulsed, slowly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. That's where they were all going, every single one of them, drawn to that red glow like moths to a flame. On day 45, I made contact with Marcus Chen again. He'd been silent for a week, his broadcasts stopping without explanation. I'd feared the worst. But on day 45, his signal came back, stronger than before. He'd upgraded his equipment, he said, found better components in his father's workshop. Marcus told me he'd been studying the sky. His father had been an amateur astronomer, had a telescope and star charts and years of observation logs. Marcus had been comparing those old observations to what he could see now through the telescope. Or rather, what he couldn't see. The stars were gone. We knew that. Everyone knew that. But Marcus had been using the telescope to look at where the stars should be, and he'd seen something that changed everything. The stars weren't gone. They were blocked. There was something between Earth and the rest of the universe. Something vast and dark that occluded everything beyond it. And it was getting closer. Every night, Marcus measured the angles, calculated the distances, and every night the measurements showed this thing approaching Earth. He estimated it would reach us in about 30 days, maybe less. Marcus asked me what I thought it was. I didn't have an answer. A cloud of cosmic dust? An asteroid field? Some kind of weapon or attack from something beyond human understanding? Marcus had his own theory. He said his father used to tell him about the Fermi paradox, the question of why we'd never detected alien life despite the mathematical probability that it should exist. His father's favorite answer to that paradox was the dark forest theory, that the universe was full of life, but every civilization stayed silent and hidden because being noticed meant being destroyed. Marcus thought maybe something had noticed us, looked at our little planet spinning around our little star, and decided to visit. And when it arrived, it turned off our light. Not out of cruelty, just because it didn't need light, because it was used to darkness, because light was foreign to it. He asked if I thought we were being punished for something, maybe for our broadcasts, our signals we'd been sending into space for decades, attracting attention we shouldn't have attracted. I told him I didn't know, but it felt more like we were being ignored, like humanity was just collateral damage in something vast and incomprehensible, like we were insects whose nest had been disturbed by something that didn't even register we existed. We talked for 3 hours that night. Marcus was smart, smarter than I'd been at his age. He had theories and calculations and observations. But underneath all that intelligence, he was just a scared kid who'd lost his family and didn't know how to process the end of the world. I told him about Sarah, about how she'd died and how I'd been driving around on her birthday when the sun vanished. Told him that grief was hard but survivable, that even when you think you can't keep going, somehow you do. Marcus asked if I really believed we'd survive this. I lied and said yes. On day 51, Marcus's signal went dead, just like Elena's had. One night his broadcast was there. The next night, nothing but static. I called for him for days. Tried every frequency. Begged him to respond. But there was nothing. Just silence and empty air. I was alone again. The network of survivors I'd been building was shrinking. Bill Holloway had gone silent on day 47. The Morrison family stopped responding on day 49. Dr. Walsh's hospital broadcasts ended on day 50. One by one, the voices in the darkness were disappearing. And all I could do was keep broadcasting. Keep warning people. Keep hoping someone was listening. On day 55, I found more recordings in the station archive. Tapes I'd missed before, hidden in a drawer underneath old equipment. They were dated March 18th through March 20th. Daniel Torres's voice. I'd listened to the first few recordings before, the ones where Daniel described seeing his brother, hearing voices. But these new tapes were different. These were his later recordings, the ones he made right before he disappeared. In the first new recording, Daniel's voice was different. Not frantic, calm, almost peaceful. He said he understood now, said the voices weren't trying to hurt him. They were calling him home. His brother Miguel wasn't really gone. None of the dead were really gone. They were waiting in the darkness, waiting for the living to join them. In the second recording, Daniel described what he'd seen. Said he'd gone outside, past the fence, walked east for a while following the voices. Said he'd seen where they all went. A place where the boundaries between life and death didn't exist anymore. Where everyone who'd ever died was waiting, conscious and aware and together. He said it was beautiful, said it was peaceful, said he was going back there and he wasn't coming back to the tower. Said whoever found these recordings shouldn't mourn him. He'd found something better than survival. The third recording was just breathing, heavy and wet, like Daniel was crying or laughing or both. And underneath his breathing, I could hear other sounds. That clicking noise, that scraping, and voices, lots of voices, all talking at once in words I couldn't quite make out. The fourth recording was Daniel's voice, but wrong. The words were right, but the tone was off, flat and emotionless, like someone reading a script they didn't understand. He said, "I'm going east. I'm going home. I'm not alone. Come with me. Come with us. We are waiting. We are all waiting. The door is open. The door is always open. Come home. Come home. Come home." Then the recording ended. I sat in the control room staring at that tape player for an hour, not moving, barely breathing. Daniel hadn't disappeared. He'd chosen to leave, had walked into the darkness willingly, following those voices, believing he was going to reunite with his dead brother. And something had answered him. Something had taken him, made him into one of those walkers, maybe, or something worse. I thought about all the other disappearances. Elena, Marcus, Bill, all those survivors who'd gone silent. Had they all been hearing voices? Had they all chosen to follow them? Or had something else happened? I didn't know, but I knew I needed to be more careful, needed to not listen when the voices called, because I'd been hearing them too. Faint whispers at night, just below the range of conscious hearing, saying my name, saying Sarah's name, promising reunion and peace and an end to loneliness. And some part of me wanted to follow them, wanted to believe that Sarah was out there waiting, that I could see her again if I just walked into the darkness and kept walking east. But I didn't. I stayed in the tower, kept broadcasting, kept surviving, because that's what Sarah would have wanted. She wouldn't want me to give up, wouldn't want me to walk away from helping people just because I missed her. On day 60, something changed. The walkers stopped. All of them, everywhere I could see from the tower, they just stopped moving. Stood there in the darkness like statues, thousands of them frozen in place, all facing east. Not swaying, not moving at all, just standing. I watched through binoculars for 6 hours, waiting for them to move again. They didn't. They just stood there in perfect stillness, like they were waiting for something. Then I heard it. A sound from the east, from that red glow on the horizon. It wasn't loud, but it resonated through everything. Through the ground, through the tower, through my chest and bones and teeth. A deep, thrumming pulse, like the heartbeat of something impossibly vast. The walkers began to sway, all of them, in perfect synchronization, rocking back and forth to that rhythm. Thousands of bodies moving as one, like wheat in the wind. And then they started to sing, not words, not language, just sound, rising and falling, millions of voices harmonizing into something that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. I covered my ears, but I could still hear it. feel it vibrating through my skull. It sounded like music, like whale song, like the groaning of glaciers, like nothing that should come from human throats. It lasted for hours. The sun should have risen during that time, should have been mid-morning by Earth's old rhythm. But the darkness continued, and the song continued, and the heartbeat pulse continued. And I realized this was a response. Something in the east was calling to the walkers, and they were singing back. Answering, acknowledging, saying they understood and they were coming. When the singing finally stopped, the walkers started moving again, still heading east, but faster now, more purposeful, not the slow, steady pace from before. Now they moved with intention, with urgency, like they were being pulled by something they couldn't resist. After that day, I didn't hear any more survivors on the radio. Not a single voice. Just static, and sometimes, underneath the static, that same thrumming sound, that same pulse, like it was spreading through the airwaves, infecting every frequency, filling every silence. I was truly alone now, the last voice broadcasting, the last human still trying to resist. On day 68, I made a decision. I couldn't stay in the tower forever. Eventually, my fuel would run out. Eventually, my supplies would be exhausted. Eventually, I'd die up here alone, and no one would ever know what happened to me. No one would know what I'd learned. But more than that, I needed to know. Needed to see what was happening in the east, what all those walkers were moving toward, what was making that sound, that red glow, that heartbeat pulse. I needed to understand what had destroyed the world. So I packed supplies, battery-powered lights, water in military canteens, canned food that wouldn't spoil, a hand-crank radio, my handgun with 3 boxes of ammunition, though I doubted it would be useful. I recorded everything I knew and set it to broadcast on a loop, in case anyone was still out there listening. And I set out walking east at dawn on day 69, following the same path thousands of those things had taken. The journey was longer and harder than I'd imagined. The roads were impassable, clogged with abandoned vehicles and collapsed buildings. I had to navigate around obstacles, through ruins, across fields, going maybe 10 miles a day at most, using my flashlight sparingly to conserve batteries, sleeping during what should have been afternoon, when my exhaustion overcame my fear. I saw walkers everywhere, always heading in the same direction. I kept my distance and they ignored me. They were focused entirely on their destination, single-minded and relentless. On day 72, I found a town called Millbrook, the same town where Sarah had died. I hadn't planned to go there, but the route east led through it. I walked down Main Street with my flashlight, seeing stores with smashed windows, cars crashed into telephone poles, a gas station with its pumps torn from the ground, and I saw the memorial, the place where Sarah's accident had happened. Someone had put up a cross on the side of Route 44 with flowers and stuffed animals that had long since rotted or blown away. I stood there in the dark, shining my light on that cross, and I cried for the first time since the sun vanished. Cried for Sarah, for Lisa and James, who I'd never see again, for Elena and Marcus and Bill and all the others, for humanity and our lost son and the world that used to be. I cried until I had nothing left. Then I kept walking east. On day 76, I started seeing evidence of what the walkers were doing to the landscape. The vegetation was dying. Trees stood like blackened skeletons, leaves gone, bark peeling. Grass crunched under my feet, brittle and gray. And that growth, those vein-like patterns, were everywhere, spreading across the ground like roots, pulsing with that faint red light. I touched one once, couldn't help it. Needed to know what it was. It felt warm. Not hot, but body temperature warm. And it pulsed under my fingers, that same rhythm as the heartbeat sound. Like it was alive. Like it was part of something bigger, spreading across the earth. On day 78, I found a walker that had stopped moving. It was standing in the middle of a field, motionless, just staring east. I approached carefully, keeping my distance, shining my light on it. The body was decomposing. I could see that now. Skin turning gray-green, pulling away from the bones. One arm hung at an impossible angle, clearly broken. Part of the scalp was missing, showing skull underneath. This thing had been dead for weeks, but it was still standing, still moving, still responding to whatever called it east. Whatever animated these bodies, it wasn't life, not as we understood it. On day 80, I met another living person. First one I'd seen face to face in over 2 months. His name was Owen Carter, and he saved my life. I'd been walking through a stretch of forest, navigating by compass, when something started following me. Not a walker, something else. I could hear it moving through the trees, keeping pace, circling. When I'd stop, it would stop. When I'd move, it would move. Staying just outside my light's reach, then it rushed me, came out of the darkness fast, this shape that was all wrong, too many limbs or not enough limbs. I couldn't tell. I raised my gun, but before I could fire, there was a flash and a bang, and the thing screamed. This high-pitched shriek that didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard. Owen stepped out from behind a tree, rifle in his hands, and said, "Keep moving. There's more of them." We ran together, Owen leading the way, until we reached a drainage culvert where he'd set up camp. He had supplies, weapons. A solar charger that was useless, but he kept anyway, just in case the sun came back. Owen was in his 40s, thin and weathered, with eyes that had seen too much. He'd been running since day 12, when his settlement, a place called Sanctuary 14, had fallen. He'd been moving east, staying ahead of whatever was spreading, documenting everything, trying to understand. We spent 3 days together in that culvert, sharing information. Owen knew things I didn't. He'd seen things I hadn't. And what he told me changed everything I thought I understood. Sanctuary 14 had been like Haven 9, like any of a dozen other survivor settlements that had formed in the first week after the sun vanished. People clustering together for safety, establishing rules, trying to create order from chaos. But Owen had worked maintenance there, had access to areas most people didn't, and he'd found things. Papers, files, evidence. Owen told me the collapse wasn't natural. Wasn't some cosmic accident or solar phenomenon gone wrong. It was planned, orchestrated. There'd been a government project started years before the sun vanished, called the Resurgence Protocol, preparation for a controlled societal reset. They'd known something was coming. Or maybe they'd made it come. He showed me documents he'd salvaged, printouts and photographs taken in dim light, hard to read but readable. Government memos about population management scenarios. Military reports about post-event containment strategies. References to something called Site Prime. According to the documents, Site Prime was a facility built deep underground, designed to survive any catastrophe. It had been stocked with supplies, technology, personnel. And when the sun vanished, that's where the people running the protocol had gone. Underground, into the darkness, leaving everyone else to die or transform or disappear. Owen said Sanctuary 14 had been a collection point, not a refuge. They'd been gathering survivors, screening them, selecting certain people for some purpose he didn't understand. People who passed whatever criteria they were using got transported somewhere. People who didn't pass disappeared. He'd escaped before they processed him, run into the darkness and hadn't stopped running. But he'd been tracking the walkers, following their migration, trying to find where they were going, trying to find Site Prime. I asked him why. Why did it matter where the walkers were going? Why not just head west, away from all this, find somewhere safe? Owen looked at me with those haunted eyes and said, "Because my wife is out there. One of those things. I saw her transform, saw something happen to her body, saw her stop being Susan and become something else. And she walked east with all the others. I need to know if she's still in there somewhere, if there's any way to save her." We agreed to travel together. Two people had better odds than one, and we both needed to see what was at the end of this journey. On day 82, we reached the source of the red glow. The earth had opened. That's the only way to describe it. A vast chasm, maybe 10 miles across, stretching north and south farther than we could see. The walkers were descending into it, walking down the sides of the pit in endless spirals, thousands of them, maybe millions, all heading into the depths. Owen and I crawled to the edge on our bellies and looked down. The red light came from below, from something at the bottom, something huge and organic and alive. I couldn't see all of it. Too big, too deep. Just pieces visible in that pulsing light. Curves that might have been limbs or tentacles or something, with no comparison to human anatomy. Surfaces that glistened and moved, like muscle or flesh or something between. Structures that looked like buildings or growths or organs, impossible to tell which. And at the center, something that looked like an eye. Vast and lidless, maybe a mile across, staring upward at the black sky. The pupil was vertical, like a cat's eye, but infinitely deeper. And it was aware. I could feel it, could feel that thing's intelligence pressing against my mind, old and patient and incomprehensibly vast. The walkers reached the bottom and just kept walking, right into that mass of flesh. They were being absorbed, pulled into it, becoming part of it. And as each one merged with that thing, I saw the changes, saw the bodies dissolve and reform, saw them integrated into the larger structure, saw their mass added to its mass. The eye grew larger with each absorbed body. The structures around it expanded. The red light pulsed brighter. Owen was crying beside me, staring down into that pit, searching the endless spiral of descending walkers, trying to find his wife, trying to spot one familiar shape among thousands. I don't know if he found her. I don't know if it would have mattered. We watched for 3 days from a hill overlooking that pit. Watched thousands of walkers spiral down into the depths. Watched the eye grow larger with each absorbed body. Watched the red light spread farther, creeping across the landscape like a living thing. And I started to understand. This thing, whatever it was, had been sleeping, buried deep below the earth since before humans existed. Maybe before life existed, ancient beyond comprehension. And something had woken it up. Our signals into space, maybe, or nuclear tests, or just the accumulated noise of 8 billion humans living and dying and fighting and building on the surface above its resting place. It had woken up. And the first thing it did was turn off the sun. Not out of cruelty, not out of malice, just because it didn't need light. Because light was foreign to it, painful maybe, or just uncomfortable. It existed in darkness, thrived in darkness. The darkness was its natural state, and now it was feeding. Gathering up the remnants of humanity, calling them with voices of the dead, wearing familiar faces to lure them close. Not because it was evil, because it was hungry, because we were food, or raw material, or something it needed to grow. The settlements, the rules, the screening, all of it had been preparation. Selecting certain people, gathering them, delivering them to this place, feeding them to this thing. On the third day, I heard her voice. Daddy? I knew it wasn't real. Knew Sarah was dead. Had been dead for 2 years. Buried in Riverside Memorial Cemetery, in a plot I'd picked out and paid for with life insurance money. But hearing her voice in that darkness, small and scared and calling for me, it broke something inside. Daddy, I'm cold. Come find me. I saw her then, standing at the edge of the pit, looking up at me. 7 years old, wearing the blue dress she'd been buried in, holding her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Floppy, the one we'd put in the casket with her. She looked exactly like I remembered. Every detail perfect. I've been waiting for you, Daddy. Everyone's down here. Mommy's here too, and James. We're all together. We're all warm and safe. Don't you want to be with us? I raised my flashlight and pointed it at her. Her eyes reflected the light. Flat and animal. Her smile stretched too wide, but her voice was perfect. Sarah's voice. Every inflection, every little pause where she'd take a breath. Please, Daddy. I miss you. I've been waiting so long. It's dark down here and I'm scared. Come hold my hand. Come take me home. I almost went to her. Almost stood up and walked down into that pit because the thought of seeing Sarah again, of holding her, of telling her I was sorry I wasn't there to protect her. It was overwhelming. It was everything I'd wanted for 2 years. But then I remembered Daniel Torres. Remembered Elena and Marcus and Bill. Remembered Owen crying next to me, searching for his transformed wife. Remembered that everything the darkness offered was a lie. I turned off my flashlight, closed my eyes, and I said, "You're not Sarah. You're not real, and I'm not coming with you." The thing wearing Sarah's face screamed, not her voice anymore, not human at all. That same shriek I'd heard from the thing in the forest. Then silence. When I opened my eyes and turned the light back on, it was gone. Owen grabbed my arm, said we needed to move, said others were coming, drawn by the noise. We ran from that place, back toward the west, away from the pit and the eye and the red light. Ran until our legs gave out, then walked, then crawled. We made it maybe 20 miles before we had to stop. Found shelter in an old barn and collapsed inside, too exhausted to go farther. Owen didn't speak for hours, just stared at the wall. Finally he said, "She's gone. Susan's really gone, and there's nothing I can do to save her." I didn't have anything to say to that. No comfort to offer. He was right. His wife was gone. Everyone was gone. Humanity was feeding itself to something ancient and hungry, and we couldn't stop it. We rested for a day, then kept moving west, away from the pit, away from the migration, away from the end of the world. On day 89, we found the tower, my tower, still standing, generator still running on the last of its fuel, still broadcasting that looped message I'd recorded. Owen decided to keep moving, said he was heading west until he found something, anything, that wasn't darkness and death. I shook his hand and wished him luck. Haven't heard from him since. I climbed back up to the control room, turned off the loop, sat down at the microphone, and I started broadcasting live again. This is day 90. I'm back at the tower. I'm alive. And I know what's happening now. I know what turned off the sun. I know what the walkers are marching toward. I know what's at the bottom of that pit. It's not aliens, not monsters from another dimension. It's something that was always here, buried deep in the earth. Something that's been sleeping for eons, and something woke it up. Our noise, our signals, our presence. And it's feeding on us now, converting us, absorbing us, growing larger with every body it claims. That eye I saw, it's going to keep growing until it covers the earth, until there's nothing left but it. If you're hearing this, I don't know what to tell you. Running might help, might buy you time, but eventually, it's going to cover everything. Eventually, there won't be anywhere left to run. Unless someone finds a way to stop it. Unless someone finds Site Prime, finds the people who knew this was coming, finds out if they have a plan or a weapon or any way to fight back. I'm going to keep broadcasting, going to keep warning people, going to stay here until the fuel runs out or the walkers come or that thing in the pit decides to reach up and take me. Because Sarah would have wanted me to help people. Would have wanted me to keep trying even when there was no hope left. The darkness isn't empty. It's full of something vast and old and hungry. It wears familiar faces and speaks with familiar voices. It promises reunion with the dead. Promises peace. Promises an end to loneliness and fear. Don't believe it. Don't listen to the voices. Don't walk toward the red light. Stay in the light as long as you can. Stay human. Stay alive. This is Marcus Webb, day 90 of the eternal night. The darkness is winning, but we haven't lost yet.